The council chamber was vast, built to hold the representatives of 7 major species that controlled the known galaxy. The walls were made of white metal that reflected light with an almost painful brightness. The floor was smooth and polished to such a degree that you could see your face in it. Above, the ceiling stretched up into darkness, covered with screens showing real-time data from across the galactic network. Captain Hayes walked through the main entrance with careful steps. He was a tall man with dark hair and sharp eyes that had seen more conflict than most humans his age. He wore the formal uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, a simple dark blue suit with Earth's symbol on the left chest. The symbol was a globe with a single line of longitude marked in gold. Around the council table sat the representatives of the 7 powers. They were tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to glow under the artificial lights. They had controlled trade routes for 3,000 years and spoke in voices that sounded like wind moving through empty buildings. They were shorter, with thick bodies covered in what looked like armor but was actually their natural skin. They rarely smiled and never showed excitement. They were small and quick, with large eyes that saw into the ultraviolet range of light. They fidgeted constantly and processed information at speeds that made other species seem like they were sleeping. The delegation occupied the seat of honor on the right side of the table. Warlord himself was not present, as protocol allowed. Instead, his son, Prince, sat in his place, was massive, nearly 9 feet tall, with dark red skin and eyes that burned with cold intensity. He wore armor made from materials that cost more than an entire human colony. Symbols of his military achievements covered his chest in lines of gold and silver. Stopped at the main podium and looked at each species in turn. He saw curiosity in the eyes of some. Others looked bored or skeptical, looked angry as if the human's very presence in the chamber was an insult. "Thank you for allowing me to speak before this council," began. His voice was steady and calm. "I come from Earth, a young world still finding its place among the great powers, but I come with information that affects all of us." A representative raised one long finger. It was a gesture that meant permission to continue, pressed forward. "The Empire has conquered 17 star systems in 3 cycles. Their military power grows each season. Their weapons technology continues to advance. Their fleet now numbers in the thousands of warships. This is not a problem that will go away if we ignore it. This is a problem that will consume us all if we do not act." Stood up suddenly. His chair made a harsh scraping sound as he pushed it back. He was so tall that even standing, he had to look down at everyone in the chamber. "Silence," he said. His voice was like thunder, deep and powerful. "You speak of the as if you understand us. You know nothing. Your species has existed for barely 300 years in space. Your ships are toys compared to our battle cruisers. Your weapons are crude and outdated. Your soldiers are soft and weak." Did not flinch. He had expected this kind of response. "With respect, Prince, I am not here to argue about power. I am here to discuss strategy. No species, no matter how advanced, can fight a war on all fronts without support. Even the cannot hold 17 systems and conquer new ones simultaneously if they face organized opposition." Walked out from behind the table. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a physical fight. He walked toward slowly, deliberately. When he reached the human, he looked down at him with an expression of pure contempt. "You believe you are clever," said. "You believe that because you have survived on your harsh world you have something to teach us. But survival is not power. Survival is what the weak do when they cannot conquer. They do not survive. They dominate. We do not negotiate. We do not form weak alliances with inferior beings." He raised his right hand and let it fall slowly toward the diplomatic floor. His hand made contact with the polished surface and made a sharp sound. Then he deliberately spat onto that same floor. The sound echoed through the chamber. "This is what I think of human diplomacy. This is what I think of human military strength. I am leaving this council. My father will hear that you have wasted his time by inviting creatures who should still be living in caves to speak as equals. When they come for your colonies, and we will come, you will remember this day. You will remember that you were warned. And you will remember that the human who stood before you was too weak to do anything about it." Turned and walked toward the chamber exit. His armor made sharp sounds as he moved. The other species watched in silence. The tension in the room was so thick you could feel it pressing down on your chest. Remained at the podium. He waited until it exited completely before he spoke again. "I understand the prince's position," said. His voice was still calm and even. "But I will speak to those who are willing to listen. Earth has survived on a world with extreme temperatures, deadly predators, and constant natural disasters. We have survived because we learned to work together. We have survived because we learned to see problems from different angles. We have survived because we never give up. A representative spoke, his voice harsh like metal scraping against stone. Pretty words, human, but words do not stop warships. Words do not kill enemy soldiers. What can humanity actually offer us? Pressed a button on his podium. A hologram appeared above the table, showing the layout of military installations, supply routes, and fleet positions. I can offer this, a tactical analysis that your own computers missed. The battlecruisers, powerful as they are, have a vulnerability. When they discharge their primary weapons, their shield generators must redistribute power for 0.3 seconds. In that time, their armor integrity drops significantly. Your massive warships are designed for large-scale combat, but small, fast teams using ground tactics can exploit these gaps. We can strike at their weak points while they expect only fleet-based attacks. The representatives studied the hologram carefully. The representatives processed the information at their normal, impossibly fast speed. This is interesting, they said slowly, but we still have no reason to trust you. 3 weeks after the council meeting, the struck. The attack came from hyperspace without warning, a sudden explosion of red light as their battle fleet dropped into normal space above station. The station itself was a massive structure, built from old military designs and constructed to hold supplies for the entire coalition fleet. It hung above a rocky planet with no atmosphere and no value except for its location. It was a place where supplies could be stored, and more importantly, it was the only route between the outer colonies and the inner systems. Watch the attack from the command center. The screens showed hundreds of ships, each one larger than anything Earth had ever built. The smallest warship could destroy a human fleet with a single volley. Knew this. He had studied the specifications, had memorized the attack patterns, had prepared for this exact moment. Around him, coalition commanders panicked. The captain shouted orders that would scatter their forces. The commander argued for immediate retreat. The representative, moving with rapid, jerky motions, calculated that they had perhaps 16 minutes before the station's outer defenses would be overwhelmed. Hold position, commanded. His voice was steady. All ships maintain current defensive formations. Communications, send orders to all strike teams. Tell them to prepare for deployment on my signal. The fleet moved toward the station with the confidence of an enemy that expected no real resistance. Their ships were painted dark red and covered with weapons. The largest battlecruiser at the center of their formation was so massive that it blocked out the light from the nearby star. That ship alone was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The bombardment began. Energy weapons lit up the darkness of space. The first shots hit the station's outer shields and made them flare bright blue. The shields held, but only barely. The station shook. Alarms sounded in every section. Personnel ran through the corridors trying to reach evacuation points. But was watching something else. He was watching the pattern of fire. He was watching the way the battlecruisers paused every few seconds before firing again. He was watching the exact rhythm of their weapons' discharge. There, he said, pointing at one of the screens. Do you see it? Every time they fire the main cannon, there is a 2.5-second pause before the shields reset, and during that pause, the shield integrity drops to 62%. The commander looked at the data. Impossible, our sensors show no such vulnerability. Because your sensors are designed to measure known variables, you are looking for what you expect to find. Look instead at the actual power flow in their systems. More shots pounded the station. The shields were failing. Another 20 seconds and they would be gone. The station would be bombarded directly and would fall. Press the communication button. All human strike teams launch immediately. Use the attack pattern I taught you. Move fast and do not stop for anything. 50 small fighters launched from the station's underbelly. They were not impressive ships by galactic standards. They were fast and maneuverable, but they had minimal armor and weapons that seemed almost comical compared to what they carried. But they did have one advantage. They had human pilots. The fighters moved with a kind of reckless speed that made the commanders pause for a moment. They were not attacking the battlecruisers directly. Instead, they were weaving through the incoming fire, using the station itself as cover, moving in patterns that no artificial intelligence would consider logical. Lieutenant Sarah piloted the lead fighter. She was a young woman with red hair and a face full of scars from her time as a military pilot on Earth. She had flown through the skis of Earth in weather that would kill most aliens. She had learned to trust her instincts rather than her instruments. She had learned that sometimes the best survival strategy was the one that did not make sense to a computer. Sarah's fighter moved toward the largest battle cruiser. The other human fighters followed her, spreading out in a loose formation that looked chaotic but was actually perfectly calculated. As they moved closer, the weapons tracked them, firing continuously. Most shots missed. A few found their targets, and 3 human fighters exploded into flame. Sarah did not slow down. She did not hesitate. She pushed her fighter forward at maximum speed. Watch the station shields die. For a moment, nothing happened. Then they shifted their fire toward the human fighters, realizing that the creatures were trying something. It was too late. Sarah's fighter reached the primary weapons pod of the massive battle cruiser. She cut her engines at the last possible moment. The momentum carried her fighter directly into the weapon assembly. Her co-pilot, a man named David, pressed the button that activated the fusion charges that they had attached to the fighter's hull. The explosion was small by galactic standards. It barely registered on the sensors. But it was placed exactly at the moment when the weapon's shields were dropping, exactly at the location where the explosion would cascade through the ship's power systems. The chain reaction began immediately. Overload spread through the battlecruiser's systems. Explosions tore through its interior. The ship's captain ordered emergency procedures, but the damage was already done. The massive warship, a vessel that had conquered 4 planets without receiving significant damage, began to die. The fleet hesitated. It was only a moment, just a few seconds of uncertainty as the commanders processed what had happened. But those few seconds were enough. The remaining human fighters hit 3 more ships in rapid succession, using the same tactics, exploiting the same vulnerability. Their ships having suffered damage they did not expect, having lost commanders who did not understand how they had been struck, moved backward. The fleet, seeing the opening, attacked with full force. The ships, finally understanding the strategy, moved to cut off this escape route. The battle lasted another 30 minutes. By the end, 3 battle cruisers were destroyed or crippled. 7 more ships suffered critical damage. The fleet retreated to the outer system and then jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a trail of debris and the wreckage of vessels that humans had defeated. Stood in the command center and felt the weight of the moment. Humans had defeated not because humans were stronger, but because humans had thought differently. Humans had seen the pattern that machines had missed. Humans had adapted. The station shook slightly as the shields powered down. Across the coalition forces, word spread. They could be hurt. They could be beaten. The galaxy had changed in a single battle, and humanity had changed it. The message came from the flagship. It was broadcast on all frequencies so that every being in the galaxy could hear it. Prince's voice was sharp and controlled, but underneath the control was something darker. Rage. I, Prince, son of Warlord, challenge Captain Hayes to single combat. The human who called himself a diplomat. The human who claimed to understand power. I challenge him to stand before me and fight, not with ships, not with weapons, hand to hand, one warrior against another. The message continued. If the human captain accepts this challenge, he will come to the neutral station at Gamma 7 in 5 rotations. He will fight me before witnesses from all the great powers. If he wins, they will withdraw from coalition space for 1 full rotation. If I win, all human colonies in the outer systems will be burned. Every settlement, every outpost, every human will pay for the insult of what happened at. The broadcast ended. The galaxy fell silent. In the coalition command center, every species looked at every other species. The implications were clear. If refused, millions of humans would die. If accepted, he would almost certainly die because no human could defeat a warrior in direct combat. Was 9 feet tall and genetically engineered from birth to be perfect. Was a man, and men were fragile creatures who got tired and bled when they were cut. Received the message in his quarters. He was alone. He read it once. Then he read it again. He did not speak for several minutes. Finally, he opened a communication channel to his second in command, a woman named Laura who had served with him in the Earth military for 15 years. He issued the challenge, said simply. Laura's response was immediate. Do not accept it. It is a trap. It is suicide. If I do not accept it, millions die. If you accept it, you die. Either way, millions might still die, but at least you will be alive for a few more days. Closed his eyes. He could see Laura's face in his mind. He could see the faces of the millions of humans in the outer colonies. He could see the faces of the crew members who had died at. He could see Sarah lying in the medical bay with burns covering half her body, having survived her dive into the battle cruiser by pure luck. Send a return message. Tell Prince that I accept his challenge. Sir, please reconsider. I have considered. Send the message. The challenge was accepted. Across the galaxy, every species began preparing. The neutral station would be the location of the most important combat in galactic history. The humans were sending their leader to die. No species doubted this. They had seen warriors in training. They had seen what even an average could do to a human. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. But spent his 5 rotations of preparation differently than anyone expected. He did not train for strength. He did not pump his body with muscle-building enhancements or genetic modifications. Instead, he studied. He requested records of every combat that had ever fought. He watched the prince move, watched his style, watched the patterns he used. He noticed that always attacked with overwhelming force. He always moved forward with power. He always expected his opponent to fall quickly. He had never fought someone who moved differently. He had never fought someone who refused to meet his strength with strength. Reached out to Earth's military archives and made a request that his commanders thought was insane. He asked for recordings of human martial artists, fighters who had trained not to defeat giant opponents with power, but to understand them with knowledge. He watched a woman move a much larger man across a mat using nothing but angles and leverage. He watched a smaller fighter defeat a much stronger opponent by making the opponent's own momentum work against them. He watched humans understand the simple truth that had been learned over thousands of years. Power was useful, but intelligence was more useful. For 5 days, he learned about balance and weight distribution. He learned about how the human body could move in ways that larger creatures could not imagine. He learned about the difference between power and precision. On the 5th day, he stood in his quarters and faced himself in the mirror. He was 53 years old. His body was strong but not exceptional. He had scars from every conflict he had ever faced. He had earned each one. He looked at himself and made a decision that was not fear and not courage. It was simply acceptance. He would fight, and he would survive not because he was stronger, but because he was willing to think differently. As prepared for his transport to Gamma 7, Warlord received reports moved first. He did not move with caution. He moved with the absolute confidence of a warrior who had never experienced defeat. He crossed the distance between himself and in 2 long strides. His right arm came up in what should have been a devastating strike, the kind of blow that could shatter bones and rupture internal organs. Did not try to block it. He did not try to absorb the impact. He simply moved. He stepped to his left, and his massive fist passed through the space where his head had been. The force of the punch was so great that it created a sound, a low boom that echoed through the arena. Was surprised, not frightened, but surprised. He had never met an opponent who did not try to resist his attack. He turned and moved forward again, another punch, this one aimed its chest. Moved again, stepping backward and to the side, letting the momentum of the prince's own attack carry him past. The arena was silent. Every being watching was trying to understand what was happening. The human was not fighting back. The human was moving aside. Was this cowardice or strategy? Realized that something was wrong. He increased the speed of his attacks. He launched a series of strikes, each one designed to crush bone and end the fight. Each one found nothing but air, moved with a fluidity that seemed impossible in a human body. He bent and turned and stepped. He did not waste energy resisting. He simply was not where struck. Stand and fight, demanded. His voice was loud enough to echo through the entire arena. Spoke quietly, his voice calm. I am fighting. I am showing you that domination is not the same as power. You were taught to impose your will on others. I was taught to understand my enemies. You expect force. I will show you something else. His frustration turned into something darker. His attacks became less controlled. He was the most advanced warrior in the military, genetically perfected, trained since birth, but this human was making him feel like he did not understand combat at all. He charged forward with a combination of 3 strikes, moving faster than he had ever moved before. Responded with something different. As charged, stepped forward instead of backward. It was the last thing expected. Moved inside the larger warrior's guard and used the palm of his hand to redirect his own momentum. It was a simple motion, almost gentle, but it was placed at exactly the right moment and at exactly the right angle. His 9-foot frame suddenly had all its momentum redirected. He had been moving forward with all his strength. Now that strength worked against him. He crashed toward the arena floor. He tried to correct his position, tried to land safely, but he was moving too fast. His left side struck the floor with bone-breaking force. The impact was massive. The entire arena shook. The sound it made was the sound of something large being destroyed, bounced slightly from the impact and lay still for a moment. Pain, real pain, something he had never experienced before, flooded through his left side. He pushed himself up. His left arm was broken. He could feel the jagged edges of bone grinding against each other, but he stood. He looked at with something new in his expression, not fear, but doubt. "I do not understand," said, breathing heavily. "You are weaker, you are slower, how are you defeating me?" Did not smile, he did not gloat. He moved toward with the same calm he had shown since the beginning of the fight. "Because power is not the same as wisdom. You have spent your entire life making yourself able to dominate. I have spent my life learning to survive against things stronger than me. On my world, everything tries to kill you. The weather will freeze you or burn you. The creatures will tear you apart. The ground itself will shake and open beneath your feet. So we learn to move differently. We learn to think differently. We learn that sometimes the only way to defeat something is to understand what it expects and do something else." Circled slowly. The prince was still dangerous, still powerful, but now he was also injured and confused. That confusion was more damaging than any physical blow. "I do not want to hurt you," said. "I want to show you that what you think is strength is actually just one kind of power. There are others." Attacked again, his broken left arm hung useless at his side. He used his right arm and his legs, moving with the precision of his training. But now that precision seemed like a limitation, had shown him that the rules he had always followed were not the only rules that existed. The fight continued for another 10 minutes. Each time attacked, responded with movement that the attack its purpose. Each time tried to overpower, used that power against him. The prince was breathing hard, covered in sweat, his entire left side a field of pain. Watched carefully, reading his movements, understanding exactly what the prince was going to do before he did it. When launched his final desperate attack, a charge that was meant to tackle to the ground, did not move aside. Instead, he stood firm and directed its momentum with his arms. It was a simple move, using the prince's own force, letting him go exactly where wanted him to go. Crashed into the arena wall. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. He tried to stand, but his body would not respond. His left arm was shattered. His right was badly bruised. His chest felt like something was broken inside. He could not breathe properly. He looked at, the human was not even breathing hard. The combat was finished. Hayes stood victorious, not through superior strength or technology, but through understanding, through wisdom, through seeing the problem differently than his opponent. The arena fell absolutely silent. Then, slowly, representatives from different species began to stand. It was not an expression of emotion that any of them had ever been trained to express. But they stood, and in their standing was the acknowledgement that something fundamental had changed. Warlord watched the broadcast of the battle in his war room. He was silent for a long time. His military commanders waited for his response. Finally, he spoke. "Humanity is not what we believed it to be. This changes everything. Send a message to Captain Hayes. Tell him that I wish to speak with him, and tell him that I am sending my son to Earth for one rotation. He will learn what it means to fight like a human fights. He will learn what it means to think like Prince arrived on Earth in a small diplomatic shuttle escorted by 2 warships. The conditions of his stay were clear. He would remain on the human for one full rotation. He would learn about human culture, human history, and human methods of combat and strategy. He would be treated with respect as a member of the diplomatic corps, but he would not be permitted to leave or contact his military advisors without approval. Personally greeted at the landing zone in what humans called the North American continent. The prince's left arm was still in a medical cast. His body showed the bruises and damage from the battle, but his eyes showed something that had not been there before: curiosity. "Welcome to Earth," said. He spoke the words simply and without any tone of victory or superiority. "I know this is not what you expected, but I believe you will find it interesting." Looked at the landscape around them. Earth's sky was blue, but a blue different from what he had ever seen. It was the color of water. The air was thick and heavy, not like the carefully controlled atmosphere of stations. And the gravity, though close to standards, pulled at his body differently. Everything about Earth felt strange and wrong and somehow alive. For the first month, watched humans move through their daily lives. He observed their factories and their cities. He watched them work on tasks that seemed simple, but required constant adaptation to unexpected problems. He noticed that humans argued about almost everything, and that they seemed to believe this arguing was actually productive rather than wasteful. He studied human history. He learned how humans had survived on a world that attacked them constantly. He learned how they had built civilizations and destroyed them and built them again. He learned how they had adapted to every challenge, sometimes through intelligence, sometimes through sheer stubbornness, and sometimes through luck. One day, brought to a location in what humans called the Pacific Ocean, they stood on a high cliff and looked out at waves that crashed against the rocks below. The water was violent and unpredictable. Each wave was different from the one before it. Each wave adapted to the rocks and the wind and the tide. "This is what humans learn to do," said. "We learn to be like water, strong when we need to be strong, flexible when we need to be flexible. We learned that the thing that seems most fragile, water, is the thing that eventually shapes everything, even stone." Watched the waves for hours. He did not speak. When he finally turned to, the prince's expression had changed. Something in his understanding had shifted. "My entire life I was taught that power meant control, that the strongest force imposed its will on everything around it. But the waves do not impose their will. They adapt to the resistance they meet and eventually reshape it." "Yes," said simply. "That is why we survive. That is why your father lost at, and that is why you fell in combat. We do not try to impose our will. We understand our enemy and we work with what we have." During the second month, trained with human soldiers. At first, the humans were nervous. This was the most dangerous individual on the planet, but was genuinely interested in learning. He spent hours with human fighters, not to defeat them, but to understand how their bodies moved differently from bodies. He learned that humans were incredibly fragile and incredibly resilient at the same time. They could be injured and keep moving. They could be terrified and still act. They could fail repeatedly and still continue trying. He spent 1 week in the wilderness of what humans call the Amazon rainforest. He was given basic survival equipment and told to reach a designated location across 50 kilometers of terrain. The systems kept him alive in that environment, but the humans who accompanied him showed him things his technology could never see. They taught him to read the signs that animals left. They taught him to understand the ecosystem as a system of relationships rather than as a collection of resources. When emerged from the rainforest, his expression had changed again. He no longer looked at the world as something to be dominated. He looked at it as something to be understood. In the third month, took to the military academy where the most advanced human fighters trained. Watched humans study philosophy alongside combat. He watched humans spend as much time understanding why they fought as they spent learning how to fight. He watched humans willingly acknowledge their limitations and work within them rather than trying to exceed them. One instructor, a woman named who had trained human special forces for 20 years, spoke directly to about the nature of his defeat. "You lost because you forgot something important," she said. "You forgot that the universe is not made for, it is not made for any single species. It is made of infinite variation and infinite possibility. When you assume that your way is the only way that matters, you become predictable. You become limited. That is what happened in the arena." Understood, his entire life he had been taught that we're superior, that their way was the right way, that adaptation was a weakness, not a strength. Now he was learning that adaptation was the most powerful force in existence. On the day before his departure from Earth, stood alone within what humans called a garden. The garden was beautiful in a wild way. It was not controlled or perfect. It was plants and animals and insects all existing together, each one adapted to its role, each one depending on the others. "I will return to my father a different warrior than I left," said. "Not a better warrior in terms of power or strength, but a different warrior in terms of understanding." "That is all anyone can truly learn," replied. "The rest is just technique." "Will there be war between our people?" Considered the question carefully. "That depends on your father. I believe he is wise enough to understand that a galaxy with humans and working together is stronger than a galaxy where either of us tries to dominate the other. But wisdom is a choice that each being must make." Return to space. The message he carried to his father was not just words, but understanding. The message was that humanity represented something new in galactic politics, not a threat to be eliminated or dominated, but a force that thought differently and acted differently and could not be defeated by the conventional means that they had always used. Warlord studied his son's report carefully. The Warlord was old and had seen many changes across his long life. He understood something that many other species did not. The galaxy had just entered a new era. The era of human significance had begun, not because humans were the strongest or the most technologically advanced, but because humans were willing to see the world differently than anyone else. Sent a message to the Coalition Council. They offered a truce, renewable every rotation. The terms included protection for human settlements and recognition of humanity as an equal power at the diplomatic table. The message ended with a personal note, too. Your species shows us that perfection is not the goal, adaptation is. We have spent 10,000 years refining ourselves. You have spent 300 years surviving. I begin to believe that survival is the better teacher. Perhaps when my son returns to military command, he will lead a new kind of warrior, one who understands that power has many forms. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Humanity had not conquered through force. Humanity had changed everything through understanding. Every species began to reconsider their relationship with humans. Every political body began to recognize that Earth held something valuable that could not be measured in weapons or ships or technological advancement. Stood in the Earth Command Center and looked at the reports coming in. 3 more species requested formal alliances with humanity. The scientific councils wanted humans to participate in research projects. The economic councils wanted human traders and merchants in their markets. In one rotation, humanity had transformed from a curiosity to a necessity, not through strength, but through wisdom. And as sent messages out to Earth's many settlements and colonies, he realized that this was not the end of humanity's story. It was only the beginning. The galaxy had finally met a species that could not be defeated because it could not be understood using conventional methods. The galaxy had finally met humans, and nothing would ever be the same. And perhaps when he returns, my son will understand something that my enemies do not. That we may have achieved perfection, but the human has achieved something far more valuable: adaptation. The message was sent. Across the galaxy, the story spread. The human had defeated the prince, not through power, but through understanding, and that understanding was becoming the most dangerous weapon anyone had ever seen. About what his son was facing. The Warlord was a military genius who had conquered more worlds than any other being alive. He understood something that his son had not yet learned. The human's acceptance of the challenge was not suicide, it was strategy. Had studied humans as much as they had studied he had read their history. He had seen how they had survived on a world that should have killed them. He had seen how they had faced extinction multiple times and refused to accept it. The Warlord summoned his tactical advisors. Prepare for the possibility that our prince may lose. If he does, I want to understand what we are truly facing. I want to know what this human has that we do not. The advisors looked shocked, but they obeyed. Arrived at Gamma 7 and walked into the combat chamber. The witnesses were there. Every major species had sent representatives. They watched as this small human walked to the center of the arena. Was already waiting. He stood 9 feet tall. He wore no armor because he did not need armor. His body was armor. He looked down with absolute certainty. He had never lost a single combat. He had never been truly challenged. He would not lose today. The signal was given. The combat would begin. Sarah's fighter drifted in space, its engines dead, its pilot unconscious from the impact. But Sarah was alive. She and her team had done what they were sent to do. They had shown the galaxy what humans could do when they refused to accept defeat. You do not need to trust us, replied. You need to make a choice. You can wait for them to come for you one by one, or you can form an alliance now. Earth will fight with you, not because we are strong, but because we have no other choice. This is our time to prove what we are capable of. This is our moment to show the galaxy that humans belong at this table. The council debated long into the night. Some species wanted to attack thee immediately. Others wanted to wait and prepare. Some wanted to negotiate with directly. Hopping the Warlord was more reasonable than his son. By dawn, a fragile coalition was formed. It included Earth and 4 of the other species. The alliance with two smaller civilizations was now balanced against a new force in the galaxy. The age of humanity's isolation was ending. The age of humanity at war had begun.